just closed the Strait of Hormuz. Let that sink in for a second. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the muscle of the Iranian regime, the guys with the speedboats and the missiles and the bad attitudes, they have announced the closure of one of the most critical waterways on the face of the earth. Now, for those of you in Rio Linda, the Strait of Hormuz is that little narrow stretch of water between Iran and Oman, about 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, and roughly 20% of the world's oil supply passes through it. 20% every single day. If that spigot gets shut, you are not just talking about what's happening over there. You are talking about your gas station. You are talking about your heating bill. You are talking about everything that moves in a truck, on a plane, by ship. And they're doing it because Israel hit Lebanon. You follow that logic? Neither do I. Meanwhile, and this is the part that really makes your head spin, folks, JD Vance just touched down in Switzerland. Switzerland, the land of chocolate and neutrality and secret bank accounts. He's joining Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner for a fresh round of negotiations with Iran. So on one hand, you've got the IRGC closing off a global shipping lane, and on the other hand, you've got the Vice President of the United States sitting down at a table in Geneva trying to make a deal with these very same people. Only in 2026, my friends. Only in 2026. There is a lot to get into today. We have got the Strait of Hormuz, the negotiations, and what this all really means for you and me and the price of everything you buy. We've got the Obama Center opening up out in Chicago with folks talking about black excellence and a scandal-free legacy. And I have some thoughts on that, I'll tell you. We've got Ilhan Omar's husband, who apparently earned $200 last year. $200. I have a nephew who made more than that mowing lawns. We have a lot of ground to cover. I'm Rick LeBow. This is Rush Hour, and we are just getting started. All right, my friends, let's talk about Iran. Because this is not a small story. This is not a regional flare-up. This has the potential to affect every single person listening to me right now. Here's what we know. The IRGC, Iran's Revolutionary Guard, the ideological enforcers of the mullahs, announced the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Their stated justification is that Israel conducted airstrikes on Lebanon. Now, let's just sit with that for a moment. Israel hits Lebanon, and Iran closes a waterway that affects the entire global oil supply. Those two things are not connected in any rational cause and effect framework, but the mullahs have never been overly burdened by rational cause and effect frameworks, so here we are. Now, can they actually do it? Can Iran physically close the Strait of Hormuz? The honest answer is sort of. They can make it extremely dangerous. They've got anti-ship missiles. They've got mines. They've got those little speedboats. They like to play chicken with American warships. They cannot permanently close it. The U.S. Navy has been operating in that region for decades precisely to prevent this kind of thing. But they can make passage through it very, very costly, very risky, and they can spike the price of oil overnight just by making the announcement, which, not coincidentally, they just did. You follow the money here. The moment this announcement came out, every oil trader on the planet started sweating, because this is how it works. You don't actually have to block the tankers. You just have to make the insurance companies nervous. And when the insurance companies get nervous, they charge more. And when they charge more, the shipping companies charge more. And when the shipping companies charge more, well, you know the rest. You feel it at the pump. You feel it in your grocery bill, because everything on those shelves got there on a truck, and that truck runs on diesel. This is the leverage Iran has always had, and they have always known it. Here is the part that I find truly fascinating, and I mean that in the most darkly amusing way possible. We have JD Vance, the Vice President of the United States, currently sitting in Switzerland at a negotiating table, working on a deal with these people. The very same regime that just announced the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. The very same regime. Same guys. Now, some people are going to say, and they'll say it in that pinched, nasal voice that people who went to too many graduate school seminars tend to have, well, Rick, isn't this a contradiction? How can you negotiate with someone while they're threatening you? And to those people I say, welcome to diplomacy. That's what it's always looked like. You think the Soviets were sending flower arrangements to the Kennedy White House during the Cuban Missile Crisis? You think the North Koreans were being polite when we were trying to talk them off the ledge? This is how these things go. The question is not whether you talk to them. The question is what you say and what you're willing to accept. And this is where the Trump approach and the Obama approach are night and day different. And I want to make that crystal clear because our friends in the drive-by media are going to spend the next 48 hours pretending they're the same thing. Remember the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA, the thing John Kerry, Jean-Francois Kerry, the man who reportedly once asked for Grey Poupon at a Wendy's, negotiated back in 2015? That deal, in exchange for lifting sanctions and unfreezing over $100 billion of Iranian assets, got us a promise, a pinky swear from the Iranian regime that they'd slow down their nuclear program for a little while. Not stop it, slow it. And we couldn't even do snap inspections without giving them 24 days notice. 24 days. You could build an entire uranium enrichment facility in 24 days. You could move a facility. You could scrub it clean and throw a dinner party there. That was the great triumph of Obama's foreign policy. They handed Iran a fortune. Iran immediately started funding Hezbollah and the Houthis and Hamas with fresh cash. And then everybody acted surprised when the Middle East got worse. Remarkable. What Witkoff and Kushner, and now Vance, are doing in Switzerland is a different animal. The Trump team does not go into these rooms apologizing. They do not go in with a predetermined eagerness to get a deal, any deal, so that someone can hold a press conference and claim a legacy. The Trump approach has always been, we want a deal, but we don't need a deal. And the moment the other side believes you need the deal more than they do, you've already lost. The IRGC closing the Strait of Hormuz right now, on the eve of these talks, that's a power move. That's Iran trying to walk into the room with some leverage, trying to remind everyone that they can cause pain. And the correct response, the American response, is to not flinch, not panic, not immediately call a press conference to de-escalate by offering concessions. You demonstrate that you are not rattled. Don't rattle easily. That's the first rule of negotiating with a regime that respects nothing except strength. The Fifth Fleet is in that region. American naval power is positioned there. Israel, our closest ally in the Middle East, is striking Hezbollah in Lebanon, which I would gently point out is something that happens when a terrorist organization spends years launching rockets into northern Israel. Iran funds Hezbollah. Iran knows this. Everybody in the room knows this. The Strait of Hormuz is Iran's trump card, and they've just played it. What happens next will tell us an enormous amount about whether this regime is interested in an agreement or whether they're just running out the clock, doing what Iran has done for 30 years, making noise, collecting cash from sanctions relief, building centrifuges, and waiting for an American administration weak enough to let them. They are not dealing with that administration right now. I want to be clear about something. I want a peaceful resolution here. Everybody does. A war involving Iran and the Strait of Hormuz and the United States military would be catastrophic in ways that are difficult to overstate. The people who died in the last 20 years of Middle East conflict deserve better than us blundering into another one. But peace through strength is a real thing. Deterrence is a real thing. And the way you get Iran to come to the table seriously is not to start sending pallets of cash to the airport. It is to make very, very clear that the alternative to a deal is something they cannot survive. That is where we are today. JD Vance is in Switzerland. The Strait of Hormuz is, at least an announcement, closed, and the whole world is watching to see if this American administration blinks. My money says it does not. All right, let's run through a few other things going on in this great nation of ours. First up, and I saved this one because it made me laugh out loud, folks. And I am not a man who laughs out loud alone at his desk without very good reason. Ilhan Omar's husband apparently earned as little as $200 last year. $200! The congresswoman from Minnesota, one of the prominent members of the squad, she has now disclosed that her husband, Tim Minette, her campaign consultant, the guy who her campaign was paying very handsomely for many years, the guy who's been the subject of financial scrutiny and a congressional investigation, pulled in somewhere south of $1,000 total from all his jobs last year. $200. Now, you may recall that not very long ago, Tim Minette was making quite a comfortable living. The Omar campaign was paying his consulting firm substantial sums. The couple's combined wealth had been climbing in a way that attracted, shall we say, professional curiosity. There were questions. There was a congressional investigation into how all of this money was moving around. And now, suddenly, in the year that all of that scrutiny has intensified, $200. My friends, if you believe that the husband of a sitting congresswoman who has been running political consulting operations, who has been the recipient of campaign payments, earned $200 in a calendar year, I have a bridge in Minneapolis I would like to sell you. A very progressive bridge. It self-identifies as a tunnel. This is the same woman who has made a career out of talking about economic inequality, about how the system is rigged for the wealthy, about how corporations exploit working people. And her husband, her own husband, the man she lives with, made $200. Either Tim Minette had the worst year of any political consultant in recorded human history, or something about these disclosures is not adding up. And I leave it to you, the intelligent listeners of this program, to determine which of those is more likely. What I will say is that the drive-by media, which spent years breathlessly covering every financial footnote connected to anyone in the Trump orbit, has been relatively quiet on this one. Relatively quiet. Funny how that works. Now, the Obama Presidential Center opened up in Chicago, and the coverage has been about what you'd expect. Visitors talking about black excellence, talking about a scandal-free presidency. And in the same breath, several of them took shots at President Trump. I want to address the scandal-free claim, because I hear it often and it requires some gentle correction. The Obama administration gave us Fast and Furious, the gun-walking operation where the Justice Department allowed illegal weapons to cross the Mexican border, and one of those weapons turned up at the murder scene of a U.S. Border Patrol agent, Brian Terry. Eric Holder was held in contempt of Congress over it. First sitting cabinet member in American history held in contempt of Congress. Scandal-free? The Obama administration gave us the IRS targeting of conservative organizations, using the tax collection apparatus of the federal government to slow walk, harass, and effectively suppress Tea Party and conservative groups during an election cycle. Scandal-free. The Obama administration gave us the spying on the Trump campaign, the use of a politically funded opposition research document, the Steele dossier, to obtain FISA warrants, the unmasking of American citizens, the weaponization of intelligence agencies against a political opponent, and we now have declassified documents showing that Dr. Anthony Fauci, America's beloved bureaucrat, the man who science itself apparently became, was actively involved in shaping the federal government's narrative about the origins of COVID-19 from the very beginning. We know that his own colleagues privately had serious doubts about the natural origin story, and those doubts were suppressed, not elevated. That happened on the tail end of the Obama era and carried into the response under the next administration. Scandal freak. Now, I want to be fair. Barack Obama himself was personally dignified. He didn't tweak things that made people's heads explode at 6 in the morning. He had a stable family life. He carried himself with a certain composure. I'll give him all of that. But the idea that his administration was free of scandal is just not accurate. It requires you to have not been paying attention for 8 years, or to have been watching a news network that decided certain stories didn't fit the preferred narrative and therefore simply didn't cover them, which, come to think of it, describes most of the networks. One more for the roundup, quick one. And this one involves the Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool, which was just renovated, looks magnificent, and has apparently attracted the attention of vandals. Multiple arrests were made over the weekend for damage to that site, and among those arrested, a 3-time Olympian. A 3-time Olympian. Someone who represented the United States of America at the Olympic Games 3 times. Went over there, wore the flag, competed under it, and then came home and decided to deface a national monument. President Trump said these people are looking at years in jail. And you know what? Good. I know that's not a popular thing to say in polite company, but these are our monuments. These reflect something real, the history of this country, the men and women who built it and bled for it. They are not props for your personal statement. They are not canvases for your political art project. They belong to all of us. The idea that you can take something that 300 million Americans share, that was built and maintained with their tax dollars, and damage it to make a point, and then expect the country to be impressed by your courage is exactly the kind of self-congratulatory nonsense that the protest class has been marinating in for years. You want to make a statement? Run for office. Write a column. Start a podcast. We live in a country where you can say virtually anything. The Lincoln Memorial is not the appropriate venue for your grievances, and the courts, hopefully, will make that point clearly. All right, my friends. June 21st, first day of summer. You know, in between all the chaos of this world, Iran closing shipping lanes, Olympic athletes vandalizing monuments, squad members with mysteriously poor husbands, there's this story from the Department of Homeland Security that I don't want to let slide by without mention. DHS honored what they call angel dads this past weekend, around Father's Day. Fathers whose children were killed by illegal immigrants and cartel members. Men who spent the weekend without their kids, who will spend every Father's Day without their kids. One of them said of his daughter, she should be graduating. She should be graduating. I want to sit with that for just a moment, because in all the noise about immigration policy and politics and what to call it and who to blame and whose fault it is, there are real people, real fathers, real families, real holes in the world where a person used to be. These men don't get a lot of coverage. They don't get the front page. The drive-by media doesn't find them particularly compelling because their grief doesn't fit the approved immigration narrative, which is that concern about border security is rooted in fear or hatred rather than in the completely reasonable expectation that the laws of this country be enforced and that the people who live here be protected. She should be graduating. He is thinking that today and tomorrow and every day after, as are hundreds of other fathers like him, the least we can do is say their names and mean it. That's what this country owes them. Not another press conference, not another task force, enforcement, protection, the basic thing a government is supposed to do. My friends, it has been quite a Sunday. Iran is rattling sabers in the Gulf. Our diplomats are in Switzerland trying to thread a very difficult needle. An Olympic champion apparently forgot what it means to represent your country. The Strait of Hormuz is in the news in a way that affects every one of us. And somewhere out there, a father is getting through the week the hard way. America is a big, loud, occasionally maddening place, but it is still the greatest project in the history of human civilization. And I refuse to let the people who want you to believe otherwise have the last word. We'll be back tomorrow. Same time, same golden microphone, same Attila the Hun chair, and the same undying affection for the audience that makes this program what it is. I'm Rick LeBow. This has been Rush Hour. Same time tomorrow, if they let us back on.